So good morning, everybody. So I've moved on to chapter 14, and chapter 14 is the main topic is payout policy. And what payout policy refers to is how are you going to distribute, and are you going to distribute cash? Are you going to distribute dividends to the stockholders, or are you going to repurchase stocks and pay people for stocks that they own, and you're going to repurchase them at a special price? So this is done often, and the reason they repurchased the stocks also was the earnings per share, right? Stocks are on the denominator. You'll have less stocks, which will raise the earnings per share, but you'll also give cash to the shareholders at the same time. So raising earnings per share is good. You want to do that to make your analysts look at your stock and say that stock is doing well. All right, so you have there's interesting things here that you should realize. Rapidly growing firms generally, and this is important, do not pay out cash to shareholders. Everyone should know, if you don't, that like Google, right? Stocks like Google do not pay a dividend, and I don't believe Amazon pays a dividend either, Amazon.com, but they need the cash to grow the company, so they will not pay out dividends. All right, slowing growth, positive cash flow generation, and favorable tax conditions can prompt firms to initiate cash payouts to investors. So basically, there are reasons why you'll give a dividend, right? If things don't look too good, if your growth is not good, or if you do have a lot of cash on hand. A lot of times Apple has a lot of extra cash on hand, and they'll pay an extra dividend. I don't know if anybody invests, but you'll get an extra dividend. All right, so as I just said, cash payouts, you can either do them through dividends, where the shareholders get a certain amount, and it's up to the board of directors how much and if to issue a dividend, or they can do share repurchases. And so when things are weak, companies don't like to reduce the dividend. It gives a negative signal. So they'll be more willing to reduce share buybacks than they will to reduce the dividend. The dividend is kind of like sacrosanct, and you don't want to play with games with that. It just gives a bad message. All right, so here's the dividends and the earnings per share, two graphs here, and you'll notice the Great Recession of 2008. I don't know if any of you remember it, but you'll notice how the earnings fell here, this big notch. That was the 2008 Great Recession, right? But for the most part, dividends didn't drop that bad. Companies, even though there was a dip, companies still managed to pay dividends. They don't like to, and so this was the companies within the S&P 500, right? Because this is the S&P 500 index, right? And that's not a company. So this is, taking all the 500 companies in the index together. So the earnings dropped, but the dividends, not that much. So these light blue lines represent recessions that went on. And of course, the 2008-9 was the Great Recession. So here is Procter & Gamble's dividend. They've paid dividends every year for more than a century. Whoops. And it's increased its dividend in every year from 56 to 2010. So here's the dividend chart for Procter & Gamble. It's a good blue chip stock to own. Gotta take a sip of my coffee. All right, so this is all U.S. listed companies on all exchanges, and here's the aggregate dividends, right? In billions, right? So we're right over time, 10 billion, 100 billion, and here's the repurchases, right? And you'll notice that dividends are always greater than the repurchases, but right around here, repurchases happened a little more often, and then of course, right around just before the Great Recession, repurchases of stock beat out dividends. and here they were pretty much flat. This is, right around the Great Recession time. So just to read this to you, basically, share purchases gain worldwide popularity. In most of the world's large economies, repurchases have been on the rise in recent years, eclipsing dividend payments at least some of the time in countries, and they list a bunch of countries. A recent study of payout policy at firms from 25 different countries found that share repurchases rose at an annual rate of 19% from 1999 to 2008, the year of the Great Recession. So that's become a real popular thing to repurchase shares. All right, so in addition to simply returning cash to shareholders, companies also typically say they repurchase stock because they believe their stock is undervalued. Yet new research shows that companies often use creative financial reporting, and of course this went on with accounting scandals, right, around 2000, to push earnings downward before buybacks, making the stock seem undervalued and causing its price to bounce higher after the buyback. So there's games that are played, but the earnings per share will go up with less shares, as I said, right? Remember, earnings per share, the shares are in the denominator. All right, so basically, how are dividends paid on stock? Dividends are paid on stock at quarterly or semi-annual meetings. The board of directors decides whether and how much cash dividends to pay, as I previously said. If the firm has already established a precedent of paying dividends, the decision facing the board is usually whether to maintain or increase the dividend, and that decision is based primarily on the firm's recent performance and its ability to generate cash flow in the future. All right, so boards rarely cut dividends unless they believe that the firm's ability to generate cash is in serious jeopardy. As I said, it gives a negative signal. So as a company like AT&T, which I personally own, pays a 5% dividend, which is huge. The only problem is their stock has been dropping lately, and the only way to get people to buy their stock is by issuing a huge dividend. Verizon is a similar company that does that. They pay, I think, about a 4.5% dividend. So if you like dividend-paying stocks, those are the two to shoot for. The only problem is their stocks have not been really performing too well lately. From a capital gains point of view, the stocks have not been going up. All right, so here's the number of firms maintaining dividends over time. Here's the number of firms increasing dividends, which is not a lot. And here's the number of companies decreasing dividends. And you can see there was a slight bump during the Great Recession. But you'll notice there was a downward trend after the Great Recession of companies probably cutting their dividend. It says, maintaining it, and maintaining means either going up or down, but in most probability they were going down. All right, so these are a couple terms that we have to know. These are very, very important terms, and I want you to make sure you understand these terms. All right, so the date of record for dividends is set by the firm's directors. The date on which all persons whose names are recorded as stockholders receive a declared dividend at a specified future time. All right, a stock will go, there's a term here called ex-dividend for a period beginning 2 business days prior to the date of record, during which a stock is sold without the right to receive the current dividend. And I'm going to go, there'll be an example of these terms in a minute. There's a little table. All right, the payment date is set by the directors. This is the actual date on which the firm mails the check to you or puts it in your account electronically. Most dividends are paid electronically if you have a broker like I do. I have an online brokerage, and they just automatically. And I also have my dividends reinvested to buy more shares. Many of you should do that if you have an online broker. But anyway, these terms are very important, so please please go over them. All right, so here is. Let me go back for a minute. All right, so here's the declaration date, Wednesday, August 21st. Board of Directors declares 17 cents per share dividend payable to holders of record on Tuesday, September 10th, right? And and payable on Tuesday, October 1st. All right, so this is the declaration date. Ex-dividend date is Friday, September 6th, right? Because it's 2 business days before to hold a date of record. The date of record is September 10th, as they said, and the stock will go ex-dividend 2 business days. There's a weekend in between, so you'll notice there's 4 days, but it's 2 business days, okay? Stock begins to sell ex-dividend on Friday, September 6th, which is 2 business days before the Tuesday, September 10th date of record. If you bought a stock either on the 6th or the 9th, you won't get a dividend, all right? So there's no dividend on those 2 days. All right, and the check is mailed on Tuesday, October 1st. It says payable on Tuesday, October 1st. 17 cents per share are mailed on Tuesday, October 1st to all holders of record on Tuesday, September 10th. So if you're a holder on September 10th and you didn't go ex-dividend, you'll get an electronic or payment or a check in the mail. All right, so let's go over this example here. Let me take a sip of coffee. On August 21st, 2013, the board of directors of Best Buy announced that the firm's next quarterly cash dividend would be 17 cents per share, payable October 1st to shareholders of record on Tuesday, September 10th. The stock would begin trading ex-dividend on Friday, September 6th. At the time, Best Buy had 340 million plus shares of common stock outstanding. So the total dividend would be almost 58 million. I guess you multiply 17 cents times this, right? So the dividend was declared. The key accounts of the firm were as follows: 680,000 in cash, dividends payable none, and the retained earnings were 3,395,000. This is dividends here. Cash retained earnings with dividends that really belong to the shareholders that were never paid out, and they keep that as retained earnings. Okay. So when the dividend was announced by the board of directors, $58 million of the retained earnings, 17 cents per share times 341 million shares, was transferred to the dividends payable account. Here it is, right? The key account thus became 680,000. Right? There should be extra zeros here, right? This is right, 617 cents times 341 million shares was roughly $58 million here, right? Not 57,000. So anyway, just do the math, and basically the 58 million came out of the retained earnings account. And then the dividend was paid. When they paid the dividend goes back to 0, and the retained earnings is basically showed as 3,337,000. Right, and the cash account basically stayed the same. The balance sheet had to stay in balance. So by paying the dividend, the firm's total assets and stockholders' equity it was decreased by about $58 million. Just remember, though, on a balance sheet, so the cash had to take into account on the cash side, and the liability side had to be balanced, right? What you do on one side, you have to do on the other, right? You subtract off one side and put it on, subtract off the other. All right, so I think I'll stop here. We're 15 minutes in. The file gets too large, and then I have trouble uploading it to YouTube. So we'll pick up on this slide here, slide 18, when I make the next video. All right, so everybody have a good weekend. And again, you'll be hearing from me further. I do have some questions I have to answer from you. I know that, and I will get to them. Alrighty. All the best.